Today we're going to be talking about the downward slope of our children's safety in school and the diminishing quality of their education, which is growing worse every year. Friday morning, my coworker's 16-year-old daughter came to the office because she was too scared to stay in school. She witnessed 4 violent fights that broke out the day before, and even the principal and the police officer on duty were attacked. This begs the question, how well are we protecting our children? It's not just violence that's on the rise, but teen suicide and drug use have also skyrocketed in the last few years. As parents, we have to ask ourselves, what can we do to help shape our children's future and protect them from these dangers? So join me as we delve into this topic and more. Thanks so much for joining me today in the Sandra Hartstone Show. We'll be right back after this break. Check out Hartstone Network, a place where you'll find featured documentaries, testimonials, and great teachings by many of your favorites. It's a place that we hope will encourage you in your walk with Christ. While there, check out this series we have with Mario Murillo called I Am Not Ashamed. It's a great look into his past and how Jesus has brought him to be the man that he is today. Check us out, heartstonenetwork.com. We cannot continue to turn a blind eye to these problems in our schools. They are no longer trusted public schools. They seem to have turned into government schools where indoctrination and manipulation of young minds seems to be the order of the day. Reading, writing, and arithmetic is no longer important in many schools. The agenda now is to shape their thinking and teach socialist ideology. This is being done by lying about our history and manipulating thinking. My parents' generation let them take God out of the school, and this is where we are today. Remember I said in the opening that my coworker's daughter was afraid to go to school Friday? Here's why. 4 violent fights broke out the night before. While I can't show you the video of the fight due to minors being involved, I have the audio and I want you to hear it for yourself. And then after school, someone posted this on social media. Mark this date, 5/5/23. I will shoot up the school and kill every student there. Tomorrow morning, Friday at 7:40, as soon as the bell rings, but who knows, I may do it during the day or after the school day or in between classes. All I know is everyone must die. Spread the message. It would be a shame if you let kids roam the halls while I secretly shoot them to their death, wouldn't it? Let's see and find out. Mark this date, 5/5/23. Friday, I will make history as the top school slaughterer. You can capture me, but it won't only be me. It will be other kids in the other classrooms helping me out with this memorable slaughter. But I won't tell you their names. Who knows? There may also be a bomb in the school right now. I guess we'll wait and find out. Whew. No wonder our kids are having a hard time learning. It begs the question, what is causing so much violence in our schools? My observation is that children are modeling adult behavior that they see around them. The level of hate and meanness in our society has reached alarming levels. We seem to have lost our sense of mutual respect and love for one another. God, please save our children. Please save us. Texas legislature, like many other states, has a bill in front of them to prohibit giving children sex changes, hormone blockers, and the like. For some outrageous reason, Democratic lawmakers in the state of Texas seem to think that even though a young person can't buy a beer before 18 or get a tattoo without parental approval, they have the right to alter their life forever, bringing on a lifetime of health issues at the age of 13 or 10 or whatever age they want. Many rational thinking, good people are making their position be known by showing up at their Capitol during voting to ensure passing this bill. Joining us today is activist Deanna Young, an advocate who has been campaigning for minors in the state of Texas not to be given sex changes without parental consent. She recently had a disturbing experience at the Austin State Capitol, and we want to hear from her. So welcome, Diana. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing what's going on with you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, now tell me, what organization are you with? And you told me you guys have been going out to the Capitol every day. Tell me who you're with and what you're going for.
Well, I've been working with North Texas Conservatives, and it's a group that's based out of the North Dallas area. And Brandon Burden, he's a pastor, but he's also just a big-time guy that's just out there trying to get organizations to come and to support these bills. And we've gathered a bunch of people, you know. I know that Tuesday when we went to the Capitol, we had probably 200 or 300 of us there,
Wow.
all wearing red shirts that said, Save Texas Kids. And we were in the gallery.
What bill were you fighting against or protest or working for?
So this bill was the SB 14. So we've already got one win, and that was the HB 900, which was stopping the pornography and sexual explicit content in books that were given to kids through K through ninth grade. So that one passed.
And what
already.
happened with that? To leave it out of the schools?
Yes. So now they
What's
cannot.
this new bill?
The new bill is SB 14, and that is to stop the mutilation, the puberty blockers, and surgical procedures on minors. Yes. So
And
it's a big.
I understand that you had kind of an incident in the ladies' restroom this
Yes.
week. What happened?
So, well, after that, we were all sitting up in the gallery, and we were listening to the legislators. And when the bill came on, I mean, exactly when the bill came on, one of the Democrats went and did a point of order because it said, instead of the Journal of Pediatrics, it said the Journal of Pediatricians. So there was a little bit of a word issue. But when she did that, two of the opposition, which were the transgender people that were there, started getting up and just yelling and screaming, trans rights, stop hate. And then two more people did it. And then you had
This was in the room where they vote? This is in the room where they vote and discuss?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, in the gallery. And then
Did the security stop them?
Well, they tried to, and it was really difficult. And so that's when the speaker said we had to stop. They had to stop the legislation, the procedures. So we didn't get to hear the bill, so they had to postpone it. So then the officers ended up having to arrest one gentleman right there in the gallery, and then two more out in the hallway. And they were wanting us to exit out the same area, the same doors where all these activists were. And, you know, they're yelling and screaming at the top of their lungs. And a lot of people that went with us, the conservative group, they're older people, and a couple of handicapped women there too. Fortunately, we explained to them while we were in the gallery that we did not feel comfortable going out those doors and being pushed into that crowd. So they let us go out the back door and let us go down the private stairway, which was really nice. And, you know, they're yelling and screaming at the top of their lungs. And a lot of people that went with us, the conservative group, they're older people, and a couple of handicapped women there too. Fortunately, we explained to them while we were in the gallery that we did not feel comfortable going out those doors and being pushed into that crowd. So they let us go out the back door and let us go down the private stairway, which was really nice. But still, we ended up in the rotunda where everybody was gathering, and I needed to go to the restroom. Fortunately, I was with one gentleman, and he was going to wait for me. Well, he couldn't go into the bathroom. He probably should have, because all the other guys that were in there were men. But when I went, yeah.
Oh,
so I went into the restroom.
The bathroom was full of transgender men?
Yes, yeah. So after I had, finished, I wanted to wash my hands. And as I'm trying to get to the sink to wash my hands, I have two activists, one on either side, just yelling in my ears. Stop hate, protect the trans, stop hate. I got to take a sip real quick. Sorry, mouth is dry. So they're yelling and screaming in my ears, and then the one gets his hands wet and starts splashing water in my face. And I'm like, okay, Diana, just be calm, get your hands washed, get the paper towel, and get out of there. Well, fortunately, there were two other transgender people that were kind of back in the corner, and they actually stood up for me. They were like, y'all leave her alone. She's done nothing to us. She's been kind to us all day. She's never said a bad word to us. She specifically said that they were just here to protect the kids, not us. They didn't care what we did. They were just trying to protect the kids. So finally, those two gentlemen, they were men, left me alone. I was able to leave. When we got out to the rotunda, our group down on the first floor, we all got together and we just held hands and we started singing and started praying. And as soon as they saw us down there, they were on the third floor, we were on the first, they immediately came down and busted right into our group. And so that's when more DPS were called and they had to close the whole Capitol down. So there were
What did
several.
they do when you were praying? How did they interrupt you?
So as we're holding hands, they would break through our arms, and push and yell and scream and then get into the middle of the circle and then lay down on the floor. There's all kinds of pictures and videos up online. There's a good one on Rumble right now, but several of the news media came in and took pictures and videos of what went on. So, but the bad thing is that the 3 or 4 people that were arrested, they dropped the charges. So it's almost like saying, when we go back tomorrow, because we're all headed back down there again tomorrow, because the bill's going to be heard. And the only way that our legislators know that we're there and that we need this to be passed is by showing up. And they say it makes a huge difference when people come down. A couple of years ago, they said they were lucky if they had like a handful of people that would come to listen to the bills. Now the Capitol gets filled with people, which is really good. I mean, it's good that people are starting to get involved and they're waking up to the issues. But tomorrow when we go down, of course, we've had lots of people praying for us, But because they dropped the charges on these guys, it's pretty much saying, hey, do it again. And this time, don't worry about getting arrested.
Oh, yeah, they'll be back.
It's going to happen.
Do you think that they caused a ruckus? Do you think they caused a ruckus during the vote in order to stop it so that it couldn't be voted on?
Definitely. You could tell that this whole thing was staged. You could tell that there were
really?
some there that were maybe there because, they lived there. But the majority of these people, you could tell that they were there. There was an agenda. The media was there only filming them, not us. And then as soon as she raised a point of order, they started their chants. It was like rehearsed, it was rehearsed. So, unfortunately, that is the way it was.
Now, was security justice? Did the security treat them and you guys the same? Like, were you treated with respect or what?
We were definitely treated with respect. Now, I will say one thing. Them wanting us to go out the same door and pushing us into that group of what we felt was, violent, but not physically violent, but the yelling and screaming, and it could have escalated to, physical violence. I mean, you just don't know when you put a bunch of people together. But them wanting us to go out there, that just didn't seem right, So that's when we stood our ground and we stayed in the gallery and said, we're not going out there. You got to get us out a different way so you can protect us. And they did. The DPS and the state troopers that were there, they were really, really very, very kind. And when we were praying, we asked them, do you need us to leave? And they said, please don't leave. Just continue what you're doing. Please pray.
Wow.
And I was like,
love it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Hey, I just got to ask you, just, woman to woman, how many females, how many God-made females were in that bathroom with you?
Well, one
Just
other
you?
person with myself, a conservative, and then there might have been one of the other transgenders. That might have been one that was a female on testosterone. She looked like a guy, but I could tell that she was a woman. But the other 4
How
that were
many?
in there,
How many men were in that bathroom?
there were four of them in there, and it's a small bathroom. It's just a
So there
small
was
bathroom.
more men than women. Okay,
Yes.
you just got to ask: where is America in protecting the women and the children?
I want to know where all the feminists are that used to, yell and scream to protect women's rights. We don't see them and hear them from them at all now. I don't know what happened.
Sports
to them.
issue and in the bathrooms. I mean, what would happen if like 10 of us women went and just stood in the men's bathroom?
We thought about doing that. and see how they feel, But we
Well,
know
since
that
most of these lawmakers are men, do
I
you
know.
feel like this is going to fail? Do you think that what you're hoping will happen in the Texas
I think so.
legislature?
I do think so.
Praise
We've been
God.
told, and Senator Tooth, he was down there, and Senator Bob Hall and Senator Hughes. I know those three personally, and we even had prayer meetings after everything calmed down. People stayed and had a prayer meeting. Those three men are definitely trying to get this thing passed. I know that we have all the Republicans saying yes, and there are 11 Democrats. Now, will those same 11 Democrats vote tomorrow the same way? I don't know. We're wondering.
Wow. Well,
Because
Diana,
of what
thank you
happened.
so much for what you're doing. I want to give you the last word. I want you to encourage people across America to do things that you're doing. Tell people what they can do to fight this kind of nonsense where they live.
Oh, just one, use your discernment. You've got to get out there and fight for our children. When you can go online and look at the bills that they have, go down to the Capitol. It's not hard. Of course, go with a group. It's always better to go with a group. But we have to stand up. If we don't stand up, we're going to lose our country. And we're going to lose the children's rights. Hey, there was another really good thing, though, another good win.
Tell me.
Starting in September, the 10 Commandments have to be posted in every classroom now. So that was a win.
Do you know that's actually in the Texas Constitution, I hear?
Yeah.
And people
Yes.
just take it for granted from media that it's not allowed, but it is in the Constitution that's allowed. So
Yes,
that's
ma'am.
awesome.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Diana, for your story.
You're welcome.
Listen, you're going to have to keep us updated on things that happen.
Oh,
And
I sure will. Yeah.
Good luck
I'm
in the
going
ladies'
tomorrow,
room.
so.
Check out Heartstone Network, a place where you'll find feature documentaries, testimonials, and great teachings by many of your favorites. It's a place that we hope will encourage you in your walk with Christ. While there, check out this series we have with Mario Murillo called I Am Not Ashamed. It's a great look into his past and how Jesus has brought him to be the man that he is today. Check us out, heartstonenetwork.com. The children of the United States are pawns in the socialist agenda to take down America. It feels like freedom-loving patriots are being sabotaged every single day, and our children have the most to lose. We're feeling the assaults against them daily. The statistics are staggering. 1/3 of U.S. teen girls seriously considered suicide in 2021. Only 30% of students entering college can read well enough to succeed. And laws are being passed in Washington state to castrate minors without parental consent. Only 13% of U.S. 8th graders meet proficiency standards for knowledge of history, according to the Department of Education. And it gets worse. U.S. laws have legalized pedophilia with children as young as 10 years old by marrying them off to fully mature adults. People, this is not the kind of country we want to live in. And let's talk about the dumbing down of America. The famous communist Karl Marx said, if you can cut the people off from their history, then they can be easily persuaded. Does this sound familiar? This plan to ruin our country through the education system was launched in 1898 by a man named John Dewey, the man considered the father of progressive education. Oh yeah, this has been a plan in operation for over a century. He outlined to his fellow progressives how to transform America into a communist society by taking over the public schools and destroying the literacy of millions of Americans. Here's a quote from the book Crimes of the Educators, a book by Samuel Blumenfeld and Alex Newman, a book I highly recommend. And they write, the deliberate dumbing down of an entire nation is genocidal in its impact on that nation's culture and intellectual future. You see, their plan has been so successfully implemented that it's now a fact that half of America's adult population are functionally illiterate. That means they can't read our nation's Constitution or Declaration of Independence. They can't even read their high school diplomas. You see, the goal was to destroy children's ability and desire to have critical thinking, so they would never discover their full potential, their brilliance, even their destiny. Our kids want to climb their mountain, but they're crippled by our failing education system, and they are being blamed for not doing well, and it's not their fault. Communism wants individual thinking to be destroyed. They want America to be a country of non-thinking robots that do what they are told. This cruel regime is trying to create a utopian society where critical thinking and independence does not exist. I was recently in Virginia Beach at an event called the First Landing 1607. It was a day recognizing the first landing of the English settlers that established the Jamestown colony. It was a day to recommit America to God. I caught up with Dr. Michele Bachmann, former U.S. Congresswoman and now Dean of Government at Regent University in Virginia Beach. Here's what she had to say.
One day, my 11th grade foster daughter brought home her backpack from school, and she opened it up, and there was all this nonsense in there. It was her 11th grade math homework. And I looked at it, and I thought she was kidding. It was a poster that she was supposed to color, a big poster. And I thought, gee, I wish I could have had homework like that when I was in math class. I would be on my kitchen floor with my 3-year-olds coloring, but not with an 11th grader who's in math class. And I realized 2 things immediately. One is, if anyone needs a leg up, it's a foster child. And you don't want to deny them a decent education by really pandering to them and have them color it rather than actually learn math skills, which they could use in their life. And number 2, as an employer, what kind of employees are we going to have in the future to hire if they can't even do math? Now, this was back around the year 2000 or maybe 1998, and I was just floored by what I saw. My husband and I had gone to public schools that were fairly decent. It allowed us to work our way through college and realize our dreams. We didn't come out of wealthy families. And so I knew that this would not work. Something's clearly wrong in America. And it began a godly calling in my life. I had been a federal tax litigation attorney, and so I took those skills that I had and I applied that to what happened to America's education system. And I spent 2,000 hours of time researching what happened. I read federal contracts that the federal legislation, federal contracts, contracts with state governments, contracts with local governments. I read curriculum. I read teacher training materials. I read teacher standards material. I read testing, quizzes. I read education bureaucracy booklets of what they were planning and what they were designing. And the bottom line of what I discovered after 2 years, 2,000 hours of research, what I discovered is that the federal government took over our education system. It was locally driven, and the state would oversee a locally driven education. All of that changed. That changed, and instead the federal government took over. And they did a sleight of hand. What they did is they removed teaching children knowledge, facts, and information, objective knowledge, facts, and information, and instead they replaced it with teaching attitudes, values, and beliefs that the federal government wanted to push. But these attitudes, values, and beliefs were antithetical to what most parents believed or wanted for their children. Now we're 20 years down the road, but at that time, that's what I saw.
We will continue this conversation with Dr. Michele Bachmann right after these messages.
Many people know about our clinic, but most don't realize we help patients around the globe reach their health goals. Deep down, you know there's got to be a way to get there, but you don't know where to start. Our starter plan is the first step. You'll get everything you need to experience a health transformation in 120 days.
You'll start by resetting your health with a 2-week detox. Then you'll implement our proven anti-inflammatory food plan. On top of this, you'll get a 120-day supply of essential supplements, omega-3 and vitamin DK, as well as our homeopathic drops to accelerate your health goals.
Go to Sherwood.tv now and use the promo code on your screen to receive this exclusive offer and save a total of $80.
This is your path to more energy and better health.
When you and I went to school, a 27 would have got you repeat that grade. Now, a 27, if you have a 27, you're moving on, you passed.
Well, that's right. Yeah. Social promotion is what has caused so much trouble, and it's because all the curriculum was dumbed down, and we moved away from teaching knowledge, facts, and information, and instead indoctrinated kids with attitudes, values, and beliefs that most parents don't believe and don't want their children believing. But if you look at the data, for what nations spend on education, America spends more per pupil on education than any other country on earth. And when you look at international comparative tests, America scores toward the bottom and Singapore scores at the top. So we should be looking at who are the successful nations, what are they teaching, and who are the unsuccessful nations and what are they teaching. I think we've got our answer. The garbage that's coming out of the federal government from the Department of Education. Remember, there was no federal Department of Education until after 1976. Jimmy Carter gave and created a federal Department of Education to reward the teachers' unions because the teachers' unions dumped so much to elect him as president. All we've seen is failure and falling test scores and less empowerment for parents and more empowerment for the schools, to the point now where Washington State just recently passed a law that said, parents, if you don't agree with the chemical castration or the physical mutilation, child abuse, if you will, of your children, we will take your children away from you. That's law. That's done. That's law. And there's other states considering that now too. So the state has become its own God. It's a madman. And so parents have to stand up and say, look, I am the parent of this child. I answer to God. And that's one thing we need to recognize. There is a holy God. He will not put up with little children being chemically castrated and their minds being destroyed by lies. That's what's happening to children. Someone has to protect children and protect them from our education system and protect them from these perverts who want to pervert our children's minds. The Bible says better that a millstone be tied around your neck and you're thrown into the deepest sea other than you leading a little child astray. Could we have ever thought in our lifetime that America would get to this point where we're literally turning our children into androgynous whatevers, not even male or female anymore? God save us. God forgive us from this evil that is being perpetrated in our land. But we don't just stay with cursing the darkness. We light a candle, and that candle that we light is to explain to parents there's an alternative. And never before have I been doing this, but in the last month I've realized this is the boiling over, front burning issue of our time right now. And so I'm telling parents, you don't have a choice. You have to get your child out of the public school. There are alternatives. You don't have to spend a fortune on putting your child in private school, but your child only has one chance in life. They only have one chance. So if it means downsizing, selling a few things, trying to figure something out, we can do this. And every church can become a school. And every parent can become a teacher. I know that it's daunting. I know that it is difficult, but it is easier now than ever before. The materials, much of them are free online. It's all there. And what you're going to gain is a relationship with your child. And what you're going to gain is the opportunity to build a human being for that human being's future. Because right now, a future and a hope is being absolutely pulled out of the hands of these children. A, they aren't learning much of anything in public schools. B, they're being corrupted. But C, a lot of them are turning to suicide and to anxiety and depression because they're being lied to. These poor little kids, we've never had another generation have to live and swim in a sea of deceit and delusion and lies like we're seeing right now. So as far as I'm concerned, the Federal Department of Education should be shut down. They should end it. It doesn't do anything good. It's only destroyed America's education system. And a lot of the states as well, they really have something to answer for. So the best thing that would happen is if parents could keep their own money, maybe give them a tax credit of some kind, let them get, I know I think the average now is $18,000 a year that we spend on kids. Can you imagine if every parent had $18,000 to spend. That means some moms could stay home or some dads could stay home and they could take care of the job themselves, or build schools in their churches or in their community. We can do this. This is very solvable. And I want to encourage people too. I want to give them hope, because you can teach your child to read. My husband and I aren't educators, but we taught our children to read at home before we sent them to Christian school. And we wanted to do that because if a child can read, they can teach themselves, they can learn themselves. And it only takes about 20 minutes a day. You just start off teaching them the sounds, what the letters sound like, what the vowels sound like, and then you do blends. And before you know it, they're off and running, they're reading, and they feel good about themselves because they're succeeding and they're growing up. So this is all so possible. What we don't need are a bunch of PhDs in education who have no idea what they're talking about. There's good education schools at Regent University, for instance. There's a great PhD program in education and great teaching for teachers. We have a number of Teacher of the Year have come out of that program. But most of these programs are pure filth today and garbage, and they need to be shut down. So parents have to wake up. They have to wake up because they have to answer to God for what's happening to their kids. So my recommendation is pull your child out of a K-12 public school and put them somewhere where they will be safe and they'll actually learn something. And you'll still have a relationship with your child, because too many parents now are being separated from their children because the children are prey. And most parents don't understand this. There's a war going on right now for their child. There's a literal war. And the war is to change your child's thinking and now to change your child's sex so that they're so messed up they could end up in addiction and suicide and anxiety and depression. We see it every day. So we can't allow these kids to go through that.
In addition to dumbing down our students, there's also an agenda to wipe out our history, remove God and patriotism from our schools. Dan Smithwick founded Nehemiah Institute over 30 years ago, and he has been studying the biblical worldview of our students in public schools, Christian schools, and homeschoolers. You will be shocked at what he has discovered. I've asked Dan to join us today so he can share that information with us. Welcome, Dan.
Well, thank you for having me. I much look forward to this.
Dan, start off by telling us, what is Nehemiah Institute and why did you start it?
Thank you. Nehemiah Institute is a private foundation that I founded in the mid-'80s. I did so after working for Pat Robertson for a couple of years on a project that was a way to help churches be more engaged in our culture as salt and light. And when that ended, I felt there was a need to have a way of helping us as Christians to know, are we really thinking biblically about what we think is needed to righten the ship? Because we had all these ideas. Conservatives go to meetings and push for candidates. And I wanted to know, because of meetings that I was in, how about our thinking? Where do we get our ideas from? So that led me to the development of a worldview assessment, a worldview test. And that has become somewhat of a gold standard in worldview measurement. It's used by over 1,000 schools in the U.S. and abroad to help the schools know, are they really giving their kids a biblical worldview, which they all say in their website they do. Very few do. So that's what I'm known for, is this peers test. And I do conference work. I do in-service training for teachers in Christian schools. We provide some curriculum material. So our whole mission, Sandra, is to restore America to its Judeo-Christian worldview that we were so mightily blessed with in our beginnings.
Amen. Well, Dan, let me ask you, when you measure biblical worldview, what does that mean? What exactly are you measuring?
Thank you. The test is known as the PEERS test. PEERS is an acronym standing for politics, by which we mean civil government, economics, education, religion, and social issues. So those 5 spheres, politics, economics, education, religion, and social issues, makes up PEERS. And I have been telling conferences for a few years that our problem is we are stuck in the R category. We're just paying attention to religion. We want people to know about the Trinity, heaven, hell, The Bible is the authoritative, inerrant Word of God. But the church for decades has been ignoring those other four spheres: civil government, economics, education, and social issues. And we're letting secularists and now Marxists tell us how to live in those areas. And because we have reduced Christianity simply to the R category, we are now paying a huge price.
Wow. So how many students and teachers, because I assume you test both students and teachers,
Yes,
right?
Yes.
How many of each have you tested?
Over 120,000 students, probably 5,000 parents and pastors who have a Christian school. And so we have a lot of data, an enormous amount of data over those years. And so we produce a chart that's infamously known as the Peers Trend Chart to show the worldview slide that America's in for 30 years. So the chart that you'll be showing of 100 and some thousand students from Christian homes in one of four different school settings: public school, homeschool, what we call traditional Christian schools, and then what we call worldview Christian schools, mostly noting the principal approach schools from FACE, which you're familiar with, that organization. And other than
what is it telling us?
Other than the principal approach schools, our students are going with the flow of culture. That's what it's showing us. We're moving away from a Judeo-Christian understanding of life and culture in favor of a secular culture and now on to a socialist culture. We actually had a Christian school last fall, first time in my 30 years of doing this, that scored an average into the socialist. So the chart that you'll be showing of 100 and some thousand students from Christian homes in one of four different school settings: public school, homeschool.
Yeah, so looking at that chart, it seems to show that students now believe that they need to be cared for.
Absolutely, 100%.
One for all for one.
Yep. And that's a recipe for dictatorship.
Dan, is this because, do you feel like this is because of the way we've been teaching children to read? The reading level is way down. It's something like only 30% of students going to college are actually adequately able to read well enough to do well at college.
That's a part of the story.
What is it? Like 40-some% of adults are functionally illiterate, meaning they can't even read a first grade book to their children?
Right. Our vocabulary today is 30% less vocabulary than what our founding fathers had. What's wrong with that picture? So,
of course, if you can't read, then you don't want to read on your own. You don't develop critical thinking. It basically robs you of discovering the treasures inside of you and chasing your passion and chasing your dreams because you don't feel qualified.
All of those things.
And I'm reading that this is also causing people to think they're dyslexic.
Well, I have no doubts in believing that. But it also means we're not reading the Word of God, and we're not.
That's true. That's
and
true.
When Jesus said, "Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word of God," he said something that was very important. We are ignoring that. We're trying to prove Jesus was wrong.
Wow. So just briefly explain to the people, if they may not know, what is the difference? Like traditionally for years, the way we learned and the way I learned as a child was phonics.
Yeah.
Explain the difference in the phonics versus whole language.
Yeah. Phonics is absolutely the biblical, historical method of learning to read, where you learn how to use your alphabet and phonetically pronounce words so that you can pronounce, the word as you see it. Whole
like
word.
dog.
Exactly.
So if you've never seen a word before, you can figure it out.
Exactly. The whole word, which was introduced some decades ago, was just to recognize these four characters, the shape of them make this sound. Like dog or car or house. And they see a word, they know those 4 letters, 5 letters make this sound. That greatly reduces the ability to read and to be self-educated. And that's spiritual warfare. The enemy has done this to us.
Yes, because if you read, we're taught to read left to right, and I understand in whole language, you just have to memorize that DOG is dog. So if you see those letters in dogmatic, you're not going to be able to figure out that it's dogmatic. Wow.
Every Marxist communist society has had to dumb down its people because they're more easily controlled. That's what whole language is doing to us.
So Dan, what are you telling parents is the answer? What is the solution? What do they need to do to protect their children?
two things. Number one, at all cost, you've got to get your kids out of the government school system. It's not a public school system. It's a government school system. Has been for decades. Because the public government school system is an indoctrination center that's been hijacked by Marxists. We have a wonderful resource on that explains how the Marxists moved their primary institute, the Frankfurt School, from Germany to America in the 1930s, hooked up with John Dewey, the father of modern American education, and set out to capture America by transitioning schools, university level first, down to elementary grades, with Marxist training on the nature of the child and the nature of learning.
Yeah.
That has been effectively worked.
And that has been going on so long now that our teachers that are graduating and entering the school system were raised. They're not purposely doing anything. It's just, this is what they've known.
Absolutely, especially at the university level. So teachers that come in with a degree in education, they have to be deprogrammed, literally deprogrammed. And
Dan, where's our hope? What do you see? Tell me you see some positive things happening.
Yeah. This is not new. This is a cycle that we've seen throughout history, world history, church history. When the people of God get soft, it's why the Jews lost Babylon, Jerusalem, and were exiled to Babylon. And so we're in the process of being judged. And at the end of that, when we're on our knees and we cry out to God like Israel did, God will give us favor and we'll begin a process of rebuilding. You and I are not going to see that. This is decades away. We've not paid the price yet. We've got a ways to go to really be brought to our knees. But that's going to happen. That's absolutely going to happen. And our kids and grandkids will be there to put it back together. I have absolute hope in that happening.
Do you see, I see a rising up of Christians and conservatives in this country trying to do all they can to take America back. Evil is just gobbling us up. So
Sure.
Tell me, do you see an exodus from public schools? Do you see this happening?
Well, that was one of the gifts of COVID to us, that it took the lid off of public schools. And so, yes, there has been an exodus. So a lot of Christian schools are receiving a lot of attention in homeschooling because parents are looking for a new place, and they should. But a lot of those parents were not educated properly themselves, so they don't know what they're really looking for. And that's a challenge for the schools because the parents bring in, some bad ideas. The kids bring in bad ideas. And so that's where our worldview assessment is really helping.
So, John, can you just give us a synopsis here? If I compare Christian schools with public schools, with homeschools, how does the numbers on worldview stack up? What's the percentage?
So about 85% of the Christian community in America, 85% of those kids are in public schools. That's bad.
Okay.
About 3% are homeschooled, 3 to 5%. And then you have another 5 to 8% that are in what we call traditional Christian schools. Those are just Christian schools that are public schools with a Bible class and a chapel service. But it's pretty much the same secular education program, same books as the public schools in most cases. And teachers are not well trained at all. So those traditional Christian schools, as we call them, are losing the battle. And our test shows that. The kids are going south, meaning anti-biblical, more and more every year. The hope is with principal approach schools, about 2% of those are schools in America. Those are schools that are teaching the right story of our founding, biblical principles of every academic subject, but 2%.
So what is the biblical public schools, the 85% of kids in public school, where do they come out on your biblical worldview test?
In the last 4 years, in testing youth groups, that's where we get public schools, because public schools won't buy our materials. But if we test youth groups in churches where most of the kids are going to public schools, for the last several years, they at the bottom of the secular humanism worldview, and in many cases, dipping into the socialist worldview. This is where this is 85% of our kids, the church's kids, are in secularism or socialism. So what's that mean for the future of the church? The church is going to close its doors just like it has in Europe.
Yeah. Wow.
Today in Europe, less than 5% of the continent is in church on Sunday. That's where America's going if we don't fix this problem.
So of the 2% that are doing it the right way, where do they come out on the biblical worldview score?
We have a measuring system. Our test measures from 100 to minus 100, a scale.
Yep.
Usually the principal approach schools are 70 and higher. That's what
Wow.
we call it. 70 is a biblical theistic worldview. If they score above 70, I tell parents in those schools, you can send your kids to any public university you want and they'll be okay, because they know how to recognize error and stand against it. So
Okay.
that's what we want to see schools reach, is 70 or higher on this Pear's test.
How does that compare with public school? Where does that come in at?
Public schools are below 0. 0 to minus
And
100.
you're just testing Christians in public school, right, Dan?
Just Christians. Yeah. Yeah.
And they're below 0.
Below 0. That's in socialism. Public school students are turning out socialists because that is their worldview.
So that means the
They take
church,
nothing.
home, nothing is counterbalancing it at all, it sounds like.
Of course. So we're giving our kids to the socialists and saying, would you please train up our children in the way they should go? And they are. In the way they should go by a Marxist definition.
Oh, Dan, this hurts.
It hurts.
This hurts.
Yeah.
It does. Well, God bless you for what you're doing, and keep going. Thanks so much for coming on. And listen, when the tide starts turning and numbers start coming up, come back on and tell us, will you? But Dan, how can people find you? How can people find out more about what you're doing?
NehemiahInstitute.com.
Thanks so much for joining me today in the Sandra Hartstone Show.